Okay.
So your question was about Flexbox, right? And I think that that's
Well,
a really good one. So instead of me teaching Flexbox and CSS Grid, I use the Bootstrap Grid instead. So if you are using the Bootstrap Grid, you should not need to use Flexbox.
okay.
However, if you are learning Flexbox, which I encourage you to do because it's a very powerful layout tool, and you would like to use that instead of CSS Grid, that is completely fine for the Netflix assignment coming up.
Okay.
However, you can complete the entire Netflix assignment with just the Bootstrap grid and not having to use Flexbox or CSS grid.
Okay. So another thing that so then now that you said that, another thing I did was accessibility.
Yep.
So it had it had us remove the divs and put things like audio and form and what's the that's not bootstrap, is that
That is native HTML. And so we actually have a graduate of cohort one who is an expert in accessibility. So we should probably have them in to be a guest speaker at some point. I will reach out to them about that. But yeah, accessibility is, I don't want to call it a rabbit hole, but it is an entire other topic of study that you can go into and actually make a full career out of. So I think we've touched on a little bit about how you could become a graphic designer or a web designer and just have a basis of code and basic HTML, but spend your entire day in designing tools. And then we touched just very briefly on SEO, search engine optimization, and how you can make a full-time job out of just getting Google to prioritize your search result on their search results page higher based off of how you've got your HTML formatted and your load times and your styling and other optimizations you can do there. The third area that we have now touched on a little bit is accessibility. And the reason why that's a big deal is I want to say about 5 to 10 years ago, there was actually a lawsuit by someone who had some accessibility handicaps and went on a website and was really frustrated that this big company, I can't remember which one it was, did not have their website accessible. It looked beautiful to a typical end user, but for someone with whatever handicap they had, they could not navigate the website because from a code perspective, it was laid out so poorly. And so they sued and actually won, saying, "Hey, as a handicapped user, I should be able to use the internet, right? I should be able to have assistive technologies be able to help me use that." And because of that lawsuit, it set a legal precedent, right? So what it did is it basically not only did they win that lawsuit, but it basically made companies liable for having their code be accessible, and open them up for the risk of a lawsuit if the code they were shipping was not accessible. So a lot of companies in the past 5 years have really said, and tend to be bigger companies here, but have said, hey, we really need to make sure that we're doing an accessibility pass here and that people who may be sight disabled, right, where they may be able to see part of the screen, but they need a screen reader to play things back at them, to basically tell them audibly what that website looks like on their screen. So accessibility, I'm very glad that Free Code Camp has a module on that to go through it. What you are really asking about, you showed up to office hours, so I hope you're prepared for a very long, rambling answer and a very long pretext before I get to the actual answer. What you may have been exposed to in Free Code Camp is the notion of a semantic tag, right? So
yes,
basically,
they use that word a lot. They
yeah,
use semantics a lot.
so basically, instead of saying, well, here's a div and here's another div, and we've already kind of gotten lost in our divs, right? Because divs are so flexible, we're just going, here's a div and another div, and let's put this div inside of this div. And for someone who may be looking at your website with the assistance of a screen reader, divs don't mean anything, right? Because we've got 40 divs going on. And so basically what a semantic tag is it's saying, hey, instead of using a div there, why don't we use something called an article? And that article is going to be for a news website. And so we can understand each article on the page. And so when a screen reader comes in, they can understand this isn't some generic div. This is actually going to be an article, right? And another example of that is nav. Okay, instead of putting our nav bar in another div, why don't we just use a HTML element called nav, and we'll understand okay, that's some site navigation. Well, that doesn't seem like a big shift, but now the screen reader can say, hey, I'm looking at this website and the nav section is over here and the articles that you're looking for are here. Would you like me to read those to you, or would you like me to start at the top of the screen and read all the way down? And someone who's using those tools may be able to say, oh, I'm actually trying to get to another section of the page. Read me the nav section instead of reading me all the different contents of the page. And so semantic tags are definitely something we should encourage you to use. But it is, in my opinion, hard to teach layer in the accessibility from the onset, as opposed to getting the concepts down first and then talking about how we can layer accessibility into our existing code. So I don't want you to take that as a discouragement on accessibility. Accessibility is definitely important. But I do think that we can layer in accessibility into not only our designs, but our code before that code ships to what we call production, right? And before that code makes it out into the real world and is being used there. So I'm glad you're continuing in Free Code Camp. There are very few things that I will negate in Free Code Camp and go, no, they don't teach that right, or no, they're wrong about that, right? So I really do like the Free Code Camp curriculum, and accessibility is a great thing to go back in, and we talked a little bit about refactoring, right? We did that with the subscribe button a little bit. We said, let's go back, let's refactor our code, let's revisit it. Refactoring your code to be more accessible is definitely a worthwhile pursuit, especially if you're shipping something out that could be going out to the entire web, or could be going out to someone who may have that accessibility issue and are using a tool to get around that, or to enhance that, I should say.
But it helps to have learned the divs, because the divs, I don't want to say like a placeholder, but it's kind of like a placeholder. And then when you start to create a form, this is how my brain was seeing it. When you start to really create something that you want everyone to look at, you can break it out. Because that's basically what they did in the exercise. I didn't finish it because it got late, but I saw a lot. And so like captions and different things. So
yeah, one thing that you'll see is, and this is good, just a general rule for HTML, is whenever you use an image tag, you're supposed to use an alt tag on it. And what that basically does, yep, is, you know, for someone who can't necessarily see your website, they still want to know what that image is of, so they have some context, right? And so an alt tag, something that says something as simple as, like, you know, company logo. Or if we put a website in of, you know, I think we used a warehouse image. We'll put an alt tag on that just says image of warehouse. And now all of a sudden we're going to understand, oh, that, you know, that's what someone who maybe not be able to see your website, but is kind of still trying to understand the content on it. That's what the screen reader is going to read back to them. And the other standard that's kind of been layered on top of that is what's called an ARIA tag, ARIA. And that adds another layer of accessibility and makes your website a little bit more friendly. I know we've got a UI and UX designer that works for me at my other job, or on our team, I should say, and little things that they add into the interface of, hey, when you hit the tab button, it should navigate you to different selections on the page, because the person may not be able to use a mouse or use a trackpad, but they should still be able to hit the tab key and get to a certain section of your website. And so that's another layer of accessibility that we add into our application to make sure, hey, someone may be keyboard bound and not be able to use a mouse or a trackpad, but they should still be able to navigate around our site with tab and enter. And so that's another layer of accessibility that you can add in there.
So my question about the boxes. So last night before we got off, the image showed up in preview, and I was able to. I found out what I wasn't doing, so I was able to make some boxes in preview. But I know once I closed it out that they won't be there. So when I go back, but I know how to do it.
So they'll be there. You just won't be able to edit them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so as long as you hit save before you close out, those boxes will still be on that file, but if you reopen that file in preview, you just won't be able to select them and make them bigger or smaller or anything.
Oh yeah, well I actually made them correctly, so that would be good.
Yep, perfect.
But yeah, so what I figured out what I was doing wrong. So now the question that I had, I think I sent you a message. I think I figured it out. Well, most of it, we'll see. We'll see. Perfect. Monday. But come Monday, I might be like, I don't know what's going on. So
well, and I know Thursday's class kind of made it feel like I'm throwing you guys in the deep end, and part of that is intentional, but the other part of that is that, like, I'm not going away, right? So it's not like, you know, you guys are going to work on this and I'm going to show up on Wednesday and be like, so did you finish Netflix? You know, like, I'm still going to be around. But the goal here is that, you know, I keep on saying you got to understand the why in order to understand the what, right? And I think that you guys have the what down now, but now you kind of need the free space to, you know, fly away and understand the why, right? And so that's what the point of this project is if you're staring here and you're like, okay, I got the logo in, what do I do next? You can say, well, why do I need to do something next? Well, that nav bar is up there. And I understand the why of, oh, well, we need to use the grid system, and I understand how the grid system works, so let me try my nav bar. And you get that done, and you go, it does not look right, but you know what? It's done. And so I can move on to the next section. What's the next section? Oh, that's a big image there. I got to get that image in, right? And so going through the site and getting that practice of there will be a couple crutches. There will be things of, you know, if you get stuck somewhere and you're working on it on as a group or working on it as an individual, Ariel will be in next week as our TA, and I'm still going to be around answering questions, going into breakout rooms with you guys. All of that is you know, I'm not going away. And there will also be a couple other crutches of, well, let me just peek in his code and see how he got that done, right? But the goal there is to not, you get in this mindset of, oh, well, I can code because I see what Max is doing and I just do exactly what he's doing and then it shows up. And it's like, right, but we need a little bit more than this because, you know, 5 months, I'm not going to be here. And so that's what this is kind of setting you free of, hey, you learned project-based learning to get all the concepts done, and now you don't even realize it, but you do have those concepts rattling around in your head. This is now your first chance to try and apply it.
Okay. Yeah, that yeah, I was looking at it and I was just thinking, like, there's these little things up in the right corner, and I'm like, oh boy. And then there was like this circle, like it looks like you could click on it and it'll take you back to something, and I was like, that in my mind, like, that's gonna be that's
if you look at Syracuse.com, there were, or the news site, right? There were things in the left and then there were things over on the right. And so you can go back to that, or you can go to the news site and go, oh, there were, that had a layout thing, right? And the weather site obviously looks nothing like the movie site that you're building, but at the same time, Well, there's stuff on the left and there's stuff on the right. We can use those same techniques to get that space in there, you know?
So, in terms of like a mock-up, we would look at a mock-up basically as if we would look at like an outline.
Yes.
And it would be like one, then 1A, 1B, and then, keep going.
Yeah,
And
and
you get to, then you go to 2.
that's actually a great note and something that I will do with you guys on on Monday. Someone asked, "Hey, we spent a lot of time in Trello, and I understand how to use Trello for a project, but how do I use Trello as a student to kind of keep track of everything?" So I thought that was a great question and something that we're going to address in Monday's class before I set you guys free. And then the other thing is, hey, can we use an outline to understand what our boxes are, right? Because the boxes are great and we can understand visually how to draw them, but what does that mean? How do we translate those boxes in? And so something that I can show you is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find... So this is, I'm not going to be able to find the image, but this may help you, Christy, in terms of thinking of an outline.
Right. Well, yes. So then, like, see how it even has column 2, column 1, column 6. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, and yes.
And so if you go to Amazon and you look at an Amazon page, you're going to see, oh, well, this is the first row, and there's the logo, and there's the zip code, and right, oh, the search bar is really wide, and breaking it down from there. So we'll go through this exercise maybe on the first 2 or 3 rows of our mock-up, just so you guys can get a good starting point and use this as another step in your thinking like an engineer process, right? Of, okay, well, here's a mock-up and that's very visual, so let's draw boxes on top of it. Okay, but there's still a jump to get from that visual to the code, and so maybe an outline will help. And at that point, I can go through that and hopefully use that as a good starting point.
So if we're doing our mock-up, so just from thinking from there, so that first, I told you I saw that first line, so then it's going to be all rows. So it's going to be like we might have 10 rows or 15 rows. So yep. We got to think in terms of row, and then for each row, then it breaks down of what you're putting in the row.
Yes.
Okay. And
well, we get our row, and then you take your boat, and then you go gently down the stream. But after that, yes. And there will be some rows that have their own rows that have their own columns in it, right? And that's also okay. But that outline helps figure out, oh, I'm another level deep here, so my indentation will also go another level deep and be able to follow it that way as well.
That's where all the divs,
yes.
Row, div. Okay. And then I saw something that about inline being words.
Yeah, so inline elements tend to be, think about an inline element as most words tend to be inline elements. And then a div element by default is a block element, meaning it's spanning the whole row, so to speak. It's spanning the full width. But we can change a div to be displayed inline by using CSS and just say display : inline.
Okay. I just happened to see when I was doing one of the exercises, I saw like it had a note and it said inline was just for words. And I was like, it just stuck out. So I remembered that I said I was gonna...
Span tags are by default inline elements and divs by default are block elements. But in addition to inline and block, we also have flex, display, we have flex, we have inline block, and we also have, Caitlin, pop quiz, what's the 5th one I'm forgetting?
I'm sorry, the 5th what?
CSS Display Properties. None, inline block, inline... Yeah, go ahead. So here, I'm gonna dump this in the live stream channel.
I use Flex most of the time, so I'm
Traitor! Oh, excuse me, I didn't actually say that.
I
So
just fun.
I just dropped a link in. You have to scroll about halfway down the page, but Inline and Block are our first two primary ones, right? So when we want something to display inline, think about it as I would like this just to keep flowing over, right? I would like this next element to be next to this other one, all in a line, right? Block, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. That's saying this block is automatically going to take up the full width. It's going to take up as much space as I can. The third most popular one, and the one becoming more popular, is Display Flex. And that's what gives you access to a whole new set of CSS to allow you to control whether that's going to be flexible and grow bigger, or if it should stay as small as possible. So, and then there's a fourth one there that's grid, and grid is basically a step after flex and saying, hey, I know exactly how I would like this to lay out in relationship to all of these other things, so grid it out for me. So I can't remember if Bootstrap 5 is using flex or if they upgraded to grid. But under the hood, when we use a div class row and we say div class col-4, it is using either flex or grid in CSS under the hood to make it size the way we want it to. So there are all different kinds of ways of getting the CSS rendering engine to lay out our divs differently. We just start with inline and block because those are the two easiest. And then I kind of take a shortcut for flex and grid and don't teach them because the Bootstrap grid is using them instead. So your gut of, hey, we're going to have to use flex or grid here is not wrong from the free code camp. It's just that I would encourage you to use the Bootstrap grid because I find the learning curve on that is less steep than using flex and grid directly in your CSS.
Okay. I was thinking about what Brandon said. So every day I try to do something with that because I have learned quite a bit of stuff, and it helps make things make sense. Like the past 2 days, I've been right on point, and I've been keeping up and understanding stuff. But I think that's because I spent a lot of time studying outside of class. So.
A lot of time studying, and just so you know, Jesse and I have started conversations of, hey, what number did we put in our student expectations doc, and do we need to go back and adjust that, right? Because we warned you guys there was going to be a lot of time, and we warned you it wasn't just time outside of class, but at the same time, we need to be realistic with numbers there. And so at the end of the program, we'll definitely be issuing another feedback survey, and one of the questions on that will be, how many hours did you spend on class at the beginning of the program? And then once you kind of got into a rhythm and were cruising along, you know, where did those hours average out? And how many did you spend, maybe not in the last week or two, which are always the intense crunch to get our capstone done, but, you know, how many hours were you spending on average week 4 through week 25 of the program, you know, trying to get through that. So we'll definitely be soliciting feedback there for hours invested into the program, but there is a very strong correlation between people who invest the time and people who are successful in the program, because you guys are learning a lot, right? You're learning what 10 years of professional experience that I can shove into 12 hours a week for, you know, the 6-month program. So it's definitely a lot.
You do have to kind of make it like your current thing. You know what I mean? Like he said, like you have to be consistently looking and reading. When I set up my free code camp, it asked me if I wanted to get emails. And so I got some emails last week and this week. It's a lot of information, and I will get to read some of it, you know, but it's in my email, so I won't lose it. but there's a lot of information there too. So they sent. So as I said, you gotta, like he said, you have to make, like, it has to become a part of your day to day.
And you know what? There are some students that get through this and they go, or on week 6 of the program, they try a little JavaScript, they try a little DevOps, they try a lot of front end, and they're like, can't do it. I really want to do it. I don't have the hours to dedicate to it. And it's unfortunate, but we understand. There are some people who get to that point and they go, I was so close to withdrawing, I couldn't take it. And then we started JavaScript and I saw a light. I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and I hated front end, but man, did I start having fun when I got to JavaScript, right?
So JavaScript is going to be, I don't want to say easier, but different. Better.
Different. I wouldn't say better. Different, better. I would say different. There are some people who feel like they love HTML and they get to JavaScript and they question their life choices. There are people who get through HTML and get to JavaScript and go, I can't believe I made it to week 7 to start JavaScript because this is it. This is my jam. I hated front end and now I love JavaScript. So it is definitely different. And then we are going to continue the program and find where JavaScript and HTML intersect. And then we're going to add back-end programming and databases on top of that. And so the whole point of this program is that you come out of here not only as a full stack developer, but as a full stack developer, look at the entire curriculum, right? We've got that all lined out with words you may not know yet, but we are exposing you to all of this, right? And that's something that is important for me to take a step back and remember when I see, like, you're going too fast on the feedback, surveys, or like, I feel like I'm not getting it. It's like, all right, our goal here isn't for you to come out of this feeling like you're a master as a full stack developer. Our goal here is to expose you to the concepts and teach them to you through projects so that when you get to the end of this, you can always circle back and revisit those concepts, revisit those classes, and build the confidence enough to go into a job interview where you're not applying for a senior dev position. You're not coming in and saying, hey, I can do this from start to finish. You're applying and saying, hey, I'm a junior dev. I've got the equivalent of I've got experience coming in here. I have built these things, but I'm coming to you saying I understand these basic concepts and I'm ready to learn and apply these concepts to make a difference on your business bottom line. And that's what I have to remind myself as a teacher in this boot camp, right? Is like the speed dial is cranked up, and it's cranked up past uncomfortable. Now there is a point where it's cranked up so high that it gets to the point of unlearnable. And that's where we need to back it off, right? We don't want to be getting those road runners. We don't want to be getting the I'm lost. But at the same time, if you feel like we're not going fast enough, we're going too slow, right? It's a boot camp. It's supposed to be fast. And if you guys are completing the homework assignments, even if you feel like I didn't quite get all of this, but at the same time, I came pretty close to doing all of this on my own. That is an A grade for us, right? That is, you're getting it enough to do a project, and so that's enough to move on to the next topic. But with that said, there will definitely be moments where you feel the shakeup and you feel like, oh, we're moving on to something new. This is great. I get to move on from HTML or CSS or new concept, right? And right when you're feeling good about that and feeling like, you've learned all of that, we're going to layer it back in and go, hey, remember that HTML? Boom, we're marrying that up with JavaScript.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to ask you. Like, once we make the switch, we're going to start learning so we can understand JavaScript, but then we're going to incorporate it all back. Okay.
Yep. And then right when you're feeling good about that, we're going to say, boom, React. Here's a more efficient way of writing your HTML and JavaScript and making them feel like they had a baby together. And right when you get to that point, we go, boom, APIs. Let's talk about how to get other people's data into your app. And then we go, boom, those APIs, aren't they cool? What if you could build your own? And we start building out your own. And then you go, okay, well, this is great and all, but then we say databases. Boom. Understanding databases, understanding where that data is coming from, understanding how to structure it, understanding SQL, which is another programming language you're going to learn. And then we're going to say, hey, SQL is great, but wouldn't it be great if you could get it into your backend? And you get it into your backend, and then you go, oh, well, if I can get it into my backend, I already know what an API is. I can get it into my front end. And then you're going to get to the end of that, and we're going to say, capstone time. Let's see what you've made. And then it's going to be 6 months and done and over with before you know it.
Is there any way to get this is kind of exciting that nobody else is here and I get to get all my questions
Well,
answered.
I am gonna interrupt you. Does anyone else have a question?
Is there anybody else here? I didn't
I
see
just
any.
have one question.
Yeah,
Oh
go
yeah,
ahead,
there are
Corey.
other people. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you good. You good. So I completed some of the stuff today and I submitted everything. I left a comment before I submitted the desktop and the mobile version of I think it was the news website.
Yep.
So when I submitted it to you, it only accepts HTML and CSS files, but it didn't accept any JPEGs. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I've got it set up just for HTML and CSS, just so we're making sure like there aren't other file types in there. However, I
Okay.
will say if you have a question where you're like, oh, based off of this screenshot, like, can you factor this in or whatever, just shoot me that file in Slack. And then when I go in and do grading, I'll take whatever your message was in Slack and then add that to your submission and part of the assignment. So
Okay.
if you do have other things you want to send my way, just shoot them to me in Slack and then we can go from there.
Cool. Okay. There was one other thing. I took a note of it when I was at one of the cafes today. Uh, I'll just DM that to you because I have it written down it's in my backpack.
Yeah, and I will
Yeah.
also say if I ask for a JPEG or a screenshot in the assignment, it is entirely possible that I just have the wrong file types in there. So it's also fine to DM me and be like, well, you clearly asked for a screenshot here, but you didn't let me upload one, and I'll go in and fix it. But if it's just kind of like a one-off thing, just shoot it to me in Slack, and I can figure it out from there.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and Zach, I saw your note in chat too. This is definitely one of the benefits of group office hours is that, like, sometimes you're all struggling with something that I did wrong, and that's the benefit of doing this as a group is, bringing them up and hearing that, oh, I'm not actually doing something wrong. It's Max that screwed that up. So, yeah, completely fine to either Slack them to me or shoot me a Slack message and be like, hey, you did this wrong. I want to submit a JPEG or a PNG or whatever, and I'll go in and fix it. Cool. Zach or Stephanie, any questions before we unleash Christy again?
I had a question. So for the mobile site, mine shows up as taking up the whole page. I saw that in the example you had, it like condenses it like it was on a phone screen.
Yeah, so we didn't go through code-wise and kind of enforce it. So all I did was I was in Chrome and I went into the mobile inspector and then I did a screenshot of that. So if you actually open up like my example code, even completely finished, it is going to be too wide and the design is going to look terrible because when I was designing it, we were just in those Chrome tools. So if yours looks the same way, as long as when you go into Chrome and click on the little mobile device button and everything looks right, that's a complete assignment in my book.
Okay.
I can show you if you're interested how to kind of constrain that down so it won't get bigger than a certain point if you're interested.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So it's surprisingly simple to do this. I'm going to just share... Nope, I don't have the right window open. Give me 1 second. Week 3, day... Did we finish that in day 4? I think we finished that in day 4. Let me open that one. Week 3, day 4.
I think I have week 3, day 3, because I think we reused a file from the day before.
Cool. So I'm going to share my screen and just share this, and then I'll switch it over. So this is our site. And you notice everything is still in this container. So if we take this container and go to our styles, let me just see if I have one already. No, I don't. Okay. So I hit Command F there, and that pops up our little search and file in case you didn't know the keyboard shortcut. But I'm going to add a container, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a max width to it of, let's say, 400 pixels. And so what that actually does in our browser is make it look like this. And so now if I shrink it down, it's still keeping everything centered. And if I go bigger, it's still constraining it there. Now we might want to bump that up. So I'm going to change mine to like 600. And what that will do is it will make it go up to a certain point. But now when we shrink it down beyond that point, it's still going to scale down slightly to, you know, the thinnest width that we can get of our screen. So like doing a max width of 600 may be exactly what you want, and it will kind of center everything in there. That's now a regret that I wish I had showed you guys in class on Thursday, but c'est la vie.
Do we need to add the CIC column to that in the middle? I tried doing it earlier. That's where I got stuck at. I tried adding it, and then it ended up going between subscribe and then the profile icon.
So
for some reason,
only did the CIC news one on the desktop site. We didn't do it on the mobile site.
Okay.
With that said, let me switch back to the code. What we're doing here, if you did want to add in that column, right now we've got a 6 and a 6. And that's got the subscribe button in the account circle in the right 6, and then the menu icon in the left 6. If you wanted to add in a word kind of in the center, what you could do is make this a 4 and this a 4, and then add in a new div class call 4. And the reason it's a 4, right, is 4 plus 4 plus 4 adds up to 12. And then you could put CIC news in here. And that should, and then a text center.
So it can't be greater than 12, basically, or?
Correct, yeah, because the Bootstrap grid system always adds up to 12. Unless you go in and customize it. So that looks like this in here and gets you pretty close to adding that in. But yes, whenever you are adding additional columns, you have to think through, are those additional columns going to impact my existing columns? And if they are, you need to size them differently.
Gotcha, okay.
But that's totally optional. I think for whatever reason on the mobile design, we don't have the CIC news there. And it's okay to leave that out. Stephanie, Zach, Corey, any other questions before we go back to Christy?
No, I usually like to listen and
I'm
see
good.
if something else can pop up. I'm better like coming up with stuff afterwards, but I like listening to Christy.
Well, if anything does come up afterwards or while you're working on homework, always shoot them to me in Slack, and I'll get an answer to you over there.
I was just trying to hold the space while you guys got here, so.
Hey, my pizza doesn't get here until 6:30, so you know whatever you've got, I'm happy to answer.
I want to ask for a suggestion. So, and I know that I have a person in my head that might cover accessibility and the same thing, but to have someone, because Brandon talked about like going to college, and so for those of us who already have like a associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, or like this is a career change, like having someone speak to that, and also like because I kind of did some research, but maybe like, okay, so maybe like a master's certificate at this point because you already have a degree. So I looked up some stuff, but it would be nice if someone could talk about that. I don't know if that's
Yeah, the thing I'll say is if you've got someone in mind who you think would be a great guest speaker, regardless of what the topic is, like just shoot me or Jesse their name and contact info. Because we're pretty open on guest speakers, right? So like we've had guest speakers come in and do everything from accessibility to this is what it takes to be a freelancer and running a 1099 contractor position and starting an LLC and factoring in how to do like entrepreneurship from a code programming level. So we've got guest speakers come in and talk about all different kinds of topics. We had an attorney come in last cohort and talk about like the legal side of development and intellectual property and all kinds of fun stuff over there. So if you've got someone in mind as a guest speaker, definitely send them our way. And even like to your point of if you've got a topic idea and don't have someone in mind, we can try and hit up our network for that. Answer one.
I thought you were talking about Dana when you said accessibility.
I was.
So I was thinking Dana. I don't know what she did, if she did anything above and beyond. And I haven't talked to her. Like we keep missing each other. I saw her at the kickoff, but just about changing careers and changing gears as far as doing something different and.
Yeah, and you know what? We've got, I mean, Caitlin's on the call right now, right? And Caitlin's a graduate of the program and was a teacher, right, at a school and said, teaching's not right for me. I want to go into coding and is now working at Ray Morton Flanagan as a full-time software developer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a word?
I have a master's in education, actually.
You didn't want to teach code? You didn't want to teach like STEM to kids?
Well, it's not that simple, unfortunately. New York State makes you teach whatever you're certified to teach, and that's it. So it's really like difficult, more education, that kind of thing. So yeah. And honestly, no, I didn't want to do that.
Unfortunately, my father was a school psychologist and my mother was an elementary school teacher. And so I've got education in my background as well. And what I have heard, unfortunately, over and over again is that teaching is not only just a very underpaid industry, it's also becoming very toxic as a workforce. Yeah. And the impacts of testing on people. And so I don't have a particularly positive viewpoint on higher education. However, that does not mean that I'm against higher education, right? And that actually leads me back to what my second answer to your question was going to be of if you have not joined the Syracuse IO Slack channel yet, I know we were throwing a ton of resources at you, but that's a good one because it's not super active, but there are definitely posts in there that I find very interesting. And there was one in there, I want to say roughly a month ago, where someone was saying like, hey, I'm a full stack developer. I've got some experience here, but I'm trying to figure out where to go next. Do I do a boot camp? Do I go back to school? Do I do self-led education? Do I just do Udemy and Coursera courses and stuff like that? Like, where do I go next? And I can't remember their pronoun, but they got basically a response of, well, it depends. And it got that response from several people in our community, right? Where it wasn't like we all obviously have our different backgrounds. I am a couple credits away from an undergraduate degree. I got a job offer after my third year at SU to join this startup, and that was 7 years ago now. And to this day, I still am at that startup. Literally, the only credits left for me are a liberal arts class and a writing class. And I was just like, well, I'm already getting pretty well paid and I've had other job interviews and like clearly this is not holding me up from my career path. And then when Jesse came to me a couple months ago and said, hey, would you like to teach full time? It was like, oh, I didn't realize my career path included teaching, but it was kind of a wake up call for, oh, this is where my passion is. I need to be doing more of this in my career. So, career paths are definitely varied. Education backgrounds are varied. And I never would say, oh, college is the wrong answer, right? It is an option. It is, definitely a place to go. And I know a lot of people who have said, hey, I'm going to go get my master's in computer science. And that led me to a job at Google doing engineering level tasks of, oh, what happens when 1 millisecond isn't fast enough? Right? What happens when our code is running so many times a second that we measure performance in nanoseconds? And you're not going to get that out of any engineering boot camp, right? No matter how in-depth it is. There are certain concepts or levels of education where it's like, yeah, like, go to MIT for that, Like, I don't want to stop you from that. So it is really varied, and I think that's what's great about our guest speakers. And our TAs, honestly, right, is hopefully every TA that comes in can talk a little bit about their background and why they were there. And, we've got other instructors coming in as well who have had varied degrees of experience and now may be considered a senior developer even though they don't have a college degree or even though they did come from a different track. Or Ryan Goss is one of the smartest, most experienced developers that I know, and he was literally winning Hack Upstate while he was in high school. He was coming to these hackathons and like I'm pretty sure he holds the record for Hack Upstate wins at this point because like he knew that programming was the right path for him at an earlier age. So I would say like whenever a new TA comes in or a new instructor comes in, day one, just go speech, and, encourage them to give them a little bit of the background because it's easy to forget as an individual, especially as someone who is influential, like how your background has shaped you. And just giving that, now, you may have an instructor come in and say, well, I did a 4-year computer science degree and then I went into industry and, now I'm teaching because I think it's fun. And it's like, okay. But you may get someone who, like Caitlin, has gone through the program already, believes in the program enough to continue investing their time into it. And we've really had all different levels of success. And that's what I think is so great about this program is like, we don't consider you a failure if you come out of this program and become a project manager, right? Because all of that context that you've learned throughout this program is going to make you be a better project manager, right? Or coming out of here and going into databases, like that's completely fine. Coming out of here and going into, there are a lot of tech adjacent fields and that's completely okay.
I think that, my education was based on being raised to say you have to get an education. Like I was told that early on, so I thought I had to do it. And then I ended up getting a degree that I probably have not used, to I guess to its full capacity. Maybe it was me, maybe it was the degree, I don't know. But then like my last job had nothing to do, like my last job afforded me, and it made me feel like, okay, now I have arrived. Maybe now this degree, because I was able to get it because I had a bachelor's degree. And it's like, okay, well, maybe now this degree is finally going to pay off. But I do feel like, being in this boot camp, because I did a medical coding boot camp. And I have credits at RIT towards a master's degree. I'm one class away from getting a project management certificate. And I'm like, maybe about 5 or 6 classes away from a whole master's degree. So I kind of fall in that whole category.
Yep.
But it would be interesting. It's interesting now because all the things that I've done in my working career seemed to me like now I can take all of those and couple them with this and do a whole bunch of other things. So I guess I'm kind of just would like to explore different things and hear. So I've talked to Dana briefly and I've talked to Latanya. So now I know Caitlin's story. So yeah, I think talking to the TAs would definitely be beneficial.
Yep, and you guys, I think Ariel did a brief intro during class, but Ariel came in running a successful business, working on like WordPress websites, right? And had a similar experience of like exposure to the entire full stack curriculum is what gave her guidance or made her understand what her next steps were career wise. And I think that also circles back to like, all right, well, there are boot camps that are 6 months for becoming a front end developer, right? And when you look at all of our boot camp and what it's covering, we could easily make this a 2-year long boot camp, right? But the reason why we have set up the full stack developer target and the 6-month target is to say like, but we can expose you to these concepts enough to know, oh, I definitely don't want to go into databases, or I hate JavaScript, but man, I love the HTML, or coming out of this and going, well, I liked all of it. I didn't feel like I became a master in all of it, but I liked all of it enough to know that that's what I want to be doing as my career, right? And so everyone gets a different level out of this program, and that's okay with us, right? There may be weeks where you're like really struggling and behind on homework, and we're going to reach out and be like, hey, everything okay? And you may snap back at me and go, no, I hate JavaScript. It's like, okay, no problem. Let's get you to hate JavaScript a little bit less, you know? Hey, look over here, SQL. Let's go into SQL instead, you know? But that's okay. That's kind of all part of the program. And that's the goal of the whole guest speakers and bringing TAs in and all of that, is to give you exposure and make you understand my degree was not going to be in computer science. All of my classes were in IT. I took one SQL class in community college when I was in high school, and I took one web design course from a professor who actually taught in cohort 1, which was nuts to me to think, oh, one of my college professors that I don't want to even admit how much I paid for at SU to take his course, I'm now teaching alongside of him, right? And I promise you he could teach front end a lot better. He can teach front end a lot better than I can. But, you know, all different levels of experience, and I use 0 of my degree other than 2 or 3 classes in my day-to-day job and all of that. But, you know, IT is a tech adjacent field. It isn't the same thing as going into computer science or computer engineering. But that's okay, right? Like, obviously have made a successful career for myself outside of what my college degree was in. And I knew I was doing the right thing because all throughout college, I was learning how to build full stack apps before I even knew what a stack was, right? And by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, wow, I'm spending more time working on these apps. I'm spending twice as much time working on these apps than I am on my coursework. Maybe I picked the wrong degree, but at the same time, look at everything I learned in that same 3-year period. And so that for me was where I was like, all right, I'm passionate about building these apps. That's where I want my career to go, and was there for 7 years. And towards the end of those 7 years, that's when teaching started. And I started doing that on the side. And then I'm like, oh, well, yeah, after college, I was all about building apps and learning all of that. And I leveled my way up and I went through the career ladder. And now I'm like, okay, I had an interest in startups as well. And I worked at a startup for years. I still work at a startup. And I'm like, okay, now I know the next step here is teaching. So how can I adjust my career path, not to jump ship on this startup or entrepreneurship or full stack dev, but how can I steer my career path in that direction, right? And that's what we want the boot camp to feel like for you. At the end of this boot camp, it isn't, hey, train tracks end here, or it's, all right, Now I get to get off at the station and figure out what train I get on next. And that's when you can say, full stack dev is it? I guessed right. I came into this boot camp. I loved every bit of it. That's where I want to go. Or I want to go to front end, or oh, I want to go to project management, or whatever it is from there.
When you guys when we first came to the kickoff and you guys said imposter syndrome, I was like, why would they say imposter syndrome? Because in my mind, I felt like that was negative, because I do yoga, and I'm more, my mind is more towards manifesting the things that you want. But once I read the imposter syndrome article, it all ties in together. But just hearing imposter syndrome, initially it sounds negative. Like, you've manifested everything that you wanted. You basically have manifested all of that, and it's all come full circle for you.
Yes. Yeah, and there are things where I would have laughed in your face if you said, "Hey, do you want to teach coding?" I would have been like, "Ha ha ha, no." And I had major imposter syndrome when I started at my job, right? I got hired as a rapid prototyping specialist, right, which was basically a junior dev that we couldn't trust with production level code. And now 7 years later, I'm CTO and have a team of 3 other developers working under me, and am doing consulting for an apprenticeship program, and right, like, I just have run into, like, there's just not enough hours in the day, right? I get asked more times than I care to count, have you figured out how to clone yourself yet? You know, and it's like, but while I work a ton of hours, that work-life balance is right for me right now, right? Because, like, I see the impact that it's making. And I love everything that I'm doing, right? It's, yes, I'm adding stress, but when you enjoy the work that you're doing, it doesn't make the stress go away, but it certainly lessens the blow of it. And so, yeah, I'm super thrilled with my career path, and I think it's okay to not know where your career path goes after the boot camp, just knowing that when you get to the end of it, you're not going to be considered a failure based off of whatever route you take. It's like, you know, celebrate the win, celebrate the fact that you survived 6 months of listening to me. And then, you know, we're going to guide you from there. And that's what Laura's program's all about. And we'll start chugging up from there, right? Of figuring out what all of your options are and understanding the importance of interviewing. And, you know, we will be doing mock interviews at the end of the program, right where you think, like, you're being successful and you've got all this coding down. Now we're going to throw you in an interview and ask you about your soft skills and make sure you can communicate well, and put you through a technical interview where I'm going to take you all the way back to week 1 code, and you're going to be like, I haven't done anything that basics for a while, you know? So it is, like I said, I would not be here just for the money, right? It's like, I do believe in the program, and I do believe where it's headed and in its leadership, right? I know Jesse is great about rapid iteration. I know Laura is super successful and is a great career coach. I know Jason is here to provide support for all of the things where I'm like, I'm not trained in that, right? Like, you need someone else to help you with that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that he's part of the program and is able to provide that support. And I think it's not just me, right? It's looking at the list of TAs, and I don't know, 90% of our TAs are cohort 1 or cohort 2 graduates who had so much fun in the program and believe in it so much that they're here back, and investing their time into it as well. So, all right, I've talked for long enough.
Okay, Stephanie, did you come up with something? It's your turn.
No, I like story time on Fridays.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Wayne, I saw you join. Do you have any questions for us?
On anything specific?
You know me, it's hard to come up with the question that I can not find an answer for. So any questions you have in general, or any additional stories you want to hear?
I literally just caught the last story. I'm like, ooh.
Don't worry, it's all recorded. It will all be up on YouTube. But yeah, any questions you have, technical or it's fine to not have any. Obviously, office hours are very open door and very meandering, as I personally think they should be.
Oh. Uh, uh,
All right, that's fine.
Watch the replay. I asked a bunch of good questions in the beginning about Monday. So
about Monday. What's happening Monday?
Monday
when
we
we have to
are.
build that Netflix site.
Oh, I could show you something. Oh, okay, let me show you mine real quick.
Sure.
Oh, he got excited.
Wait, did you build the entire app already?
No, hell no.
That would be really impressive because
see.
I don't know. I could build the whole thing in a couple hours. That would be.
Maybe if I have all the knowledge down, but I can't wait. That's all I can say. So it looks ugly. Let me show you.
Oh, it's awesome progress. So you've got things going on over on the right. You've got your nav bar down. Oh, you got some hover effects going in on there. You're
Yeah.
already got a jump start on your main portion with the Bridgerton. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome progress. This is looking great.
Yeah, it's
The
just that
icons are fire.
my
like the
issue
icons.
is for the love of me, that end in that series can't get close enough.
All right, let me see if I can just do a quick. I'm gonna request remote control.
Really impressed. I just have to say.
All right, so I'm gonna use the inspect tools and see what's going on.
Okay.
So you've got your N, which is an H3. Ooh, great question. Why is that so big?
Yeah.
Oh, it's because it's in this col 1. So
Okay.
this col 1 is preventing the series from coming over. So if I just take this series and I come up here, Chrome, stop fighting me. Why isn't that working? Okay, there we go. In there, okay. I wonder, is it going to let me edit?
Should.
Edit as HTML. There we go. Okay, and I put my p tag that I just pasted. Okay, so there's my word series, but this H3 might need to be displayed. Actually, oh, let's try this. Display inline. There you go. So adding an H3, adding your display inline to that H3 is what's going to get the N to show up and let words come after it. And then moving your P tag up into this col 1 is what's going to let it be right next to each other instead of in another column.
Okay. All right. Because I was going crazy for that one.
Yeah. So whenever you have two things in columns, no matter how close you get them, the column is going to overwrite any of your content or layout. And so that's just making sure they're in the same column will help with that.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I'll figure the rest out, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome progress. You're definitely gonna have a jump start on us on Monday. But that's good, right? Is coming in because this is totally self-paced and whatever you get done is completely fine. So you may get to Tuesday or Wednesday and be like, I got 80% of it done. And for this assignment, that's going to be okay, right? The main thing here is just building the confidence and saying, I can do this, right? Like I can start, I can make progress, I can get things showing up on a page, and that's what really matters.
Yes. Because I was like, God, was I taking anything in the class?
Don't worry, I have the same thought of, oh, am I hand holding a little too much? And so this is like, the cage is open, fly free, write your HTML, fight your own div battles, all of that. So I'm excited for next week. It's an important thing, right? Because if you're not excited and passionate about this stuff, you're just not going to make it as a programmer. And I know that's brutally honest, but like, and it's possible that you're not excited about HTML and you get excited about JavaScript, which is why, we don't boot anyone out of the program after week 1 or 2. Like, we need to make sure that you've got exposure to a lot of different areas. I think Caitlin will know exactly what student we're talking about in cohort 2. That was like, this isn't for me. I want to drop out. Like, I see other people doing this and they're excited about it and I'm not excited about this. And by the time we hit JavaScript, it was like there was a glimmer in their eye and they were like, oh, maybe there was a reason I made it through the admissions process. And sure enough, they graduated the program and made it all the way through. So I don't want to discourage you if you're not excited or passionate about it, but at the same time, being a programmer is hard, not just mentally and learning how to do it, but like keeping up the stamina and being beaten down 99 times by bugs and then the 100th being your breakthrough and getting it all to work. So it's tough, but Caitlin's a lot of facial expressions going on over there.
I just think that there's something to be said for why I'm still at my job. The reason is because as a teacher, it goes back to like what you were saying, Christy, like I was unhappy. I was stressed out constantly. And my job now is very stressful, but there's a difference because I actually like it versus it being not the thing that I wanted to do. And so I put up with the stress and I think it's fun and like it's stressful in a different way, which sounds like it's not, I guess it's a good stress because it's like stressful because I'm learning and sometimes I'm like really like things have to get done as soon as possible and there's not time to like really think things through sometimes the way that you want to or the way that you feel like you need to, but it pushes you to be like a better critical thinker, a better developer, and then every time you conquer like a problem you get better without even knowing. Like if you like last year even compared to this year, if you had thrown code at me that I just looked at today, if you threw that at me 10 months ago, I would have been like, what in the heck is this? I'm not touching this. I have no idea what this is doing. And it would have been scary. And now ask Max how many times I complain like about things that I don't think I've ever thought I would ever say. And it's just like one of those, like it's stressful. It's very difficult. But the reward is worth it when it's something that you like to do. So,
and I think Caitlin is a great example of not only, success story coming out of here and getting a job, but also following that success through the job and getting the experience, starting to climb the career ladder of not only, hey, this is a different career ladder you're on, but also having that upward mobility after, right? So I think that's a key thing. And I think I do want to counter just a tiny little bit of what I said of it is possible to be a software engineer and not be stressed, right? Like, yes, there are days that you will be frustrated with your code or with your progress or whatever, but like it is possible to maintain a work-life balance and be an engineer. I don't want it to sound like, oh, every engineer experiences burnout, because that's not the case. And you can work with great employers who make sure that you continually learn and continually have a challenge, but are not frustrated by that challenge. And any good employer or any good manager should be doing that.
I went into my job. They asked me so many questions, and I was just like, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, but I don't have a problem trying to figure it out and using resources to figure things out. And that's really what like got me in the door. And I'm so glad that they gave me that opportunity to prove that I could do it, because it proved it to myself as well. Like I proved to myself that I could actually do it, because the imposter syndrome was super real in the beginning, especially, but yeah, it definitely like has its stressful days, and it definitely has its days where I'm like, wow, this is a piece of cake. Or like you look at something and you think it's gonna be so hard, and then you start working on it, you're like, oh wait, that wasn't actually that bad. And also very rarely am I writing things from scratch. That's another thing. So it's like a lot of looking at other people's code constantly and trying to figure out how things were written 5 years ago when this was last changed, or like, there's a lot of stuff like that going on too. So it's definitely always a learning process, but Yeah.
Have one last question.
Got it.
JavaScript Free Code Academy has 113 sections. I just want to make sure that you tell us well enough in advance when we should start that exercise going forward.
So DevOps is week 4 is going to be Netflix project. Week 5 is project week. So that's feedback we got from the first and second cohort of 6 months of anything, of no matter what it is a long time, right? And so if we're throwing 6 months of new content at you, you have no chance to breathe or let that soak in or try things out, right? And so week 5 is no new content, no new concepts. It's let's make sure we're caught up on all the homework. It's let's work on something together as a class. It's let's make sure your portfolio is up to date. It's let's start thinking about your capstone, right? It's kind of a breather week. So that's week 5. Week 6 is the first week you finally get a break from me. And Nathan comes in and he teaches you all about DevOps and about Git and how to manage your code, how to deploy your code. Complete change up because it is all code related, but none of it is code itself. And so that's a nice change of pace. Then right when you think you've had a nice break from me, I come back for week 7 and we dive into JavaScript. Your question about telling you well in advance, we will be coming back to Free Code Camp in full force for JavaScript because I'm going to take that same teaching approach and I'm going to say, let's learn JavaScript through a project. And you're going to go, but I never learned that concept. And I'm going to, well, I gave you Free Code Camp. And then I'm going to realize, oh, I probably should have assigned that sooner. So we're going to solve that problem by the time Nathan comes in a full week before we start anything JavaScript related. I'm going to be hitting you guys up with JavaScript in Free Code Camp. So as you're practicing with Nathan and doing all the deploying stuff and all of that, you will have an entire week heads up on getting Free Code Camp done. And it's going to be a very similar thing, right? It's not going to be due until Sunday, but you're going to get it not only Friday before, but the entire Friday before to start working on them. And if you get through most of them, you're going to get full credit for the homework assignment, right? If there are some you get stuck on, that's okay. But I will definitely be laying out some Free Code Camp concepts a week in advance, and also making sure that Nathan knows about that so you don't have like hours of homework for DevOps and then hours of Free Code Camp to do as well.
I just happened to peek at it and I was like, that's something I should ask about. So
I think Free Code Camp estimates they've got about 1,800 hours of content. And that's not even counting like the videos. That's just counting their exercises and basic curriculum. So we're not going to send all 1,800 hours at you, but we'll definitely be sending you a few.
Okay, your pizza probably there.
All right, I'll see you guys. Have an awesome weekend. Anything comes up on homework assignments, you know where to find me on Slack, and one-on-ones are open for Sunday. I think I've got Saturday blocked out, but if anything pops up and you want to schedule last minute, definitely feel free to do so for Sunday. Otherwise, have a great Easter if you're celebrating that, or whatever other holidays are also going in this same time period. I know there are a couple overlaps. Passover and
Ramadan.
And I think there's one other one. But yeah, whatever. Have a great weekend. I will see you guys on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.